What would have happened at 125 pounds if the 2020 NCAA Wrestling Championships actually happened? Would Spencer Lee have become a three-timer? Would Jack Mueller make the finals again? Could Jacob Camacho or Pat Glory pull crazy upsets and end up making the finals? Well, in this video series, we're diving right deep into this at every single weight class. So if you aren't already, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. And if you are new here, my name's Josiah and I'm a massive wrestling fan and enjoy discussing these wrestling topics with you. Let's dive right into this bracket. Now, for the entire video series, I'm starting at the quarterfinals and the blood round. And the reason I'm doing that is just because I'm not going to go by each bout. That would end up being an hour-long video. It would just be way too long. And so that's why up to this point, there have been a couple of upsets. I will highlight a couple of those that I think would have happened. And starting right here at the quarterfinals, I think one of the first upsets is Colloquio over Drew Hildebrand. Drew Hildebrand is actually the 6th seed out of Central Michigan. I think that would be a pretty insane match, a pretty great upset in the early rounds. And, you know, the unfortunate thing about this tournament not happening is we'll never know which guys could have upset who because they happen every single year. That's just what happens during this tournament. So looking here now, the other upset, of course, would be Peitzel over Camacho. Camacho over Peitzel, excuse me. Camacho just had an incredible upset last week at the ACC Championships over Jack Mueller. A very sound and solid win over Mueller. And I think Camacho, as a young guy, as a young wrestler, could pull off this upset. And then down here at the bottom is another thing where Aguilar of Rutgers, he's been wrestling well this year. He kind of impressed me at the Big Tens, and I think he's also a guy who would end up defeating Peitzel. He's actually who he beat to get into the blood round. Down here we have Mackel, who just defeated Warner, as well as Courtney over Schwarm. Some of you may be wondering now, why isn't Schwarm in here? How didn't Schwarm make it in here? He had a tough bracket. He had a tough route to make it in. And I think he's one of the guys that, you know, it's unfortunate, but he did end up getting upset in this turn of events. And I will release the full bracket so you can check out all of those. But let's dive into these matchups. Starting off with the first quarterfinal bout, we have Spencer Lee and Michael D'Agostino. This is number 1 versus number 8. So this is a regular matchup that you'd see in the quarterfinals if they both won out. Spencer Lee of Iowa, D'Agostino of Northwestern. We've seen Northwestern have some solid wrestlers already this season. Now, D'Agostino, you know, while he's a solid wrestler, he did have a recent loss to Schroeder, who Spencer Lee beat pretty soundly at Big Tens. And that's why, even though these two actually almost wrestled at Midlands this last year, but Spencer Lee ended up medical forfeiting out of the match, Spencer Lee is going to move on to the semifinals. And D'Agostino is going to go ahead and move down here now to face off against Hildebrand. And now let's move on to this bout, the second bout with Schroeder versus Mueller. Now Mueller, up to until the ACC Championships, was an undefeated wrestler, an undefeated guy. Last year coming into NCAAs, he was undefeated all the way up to the finals whenever he faced off against Spencer Lee. Now at this point in the match, facing off against Schroeder, previously he actually has a win over him, a 6-2 victory, and that's why I have to give this victory to Mueller again. Even though he does have that loss to Camacho, he's wrestled a very sound season. And we're going to see this quarterfinal or the semifinals matchup now. Schroeder's going to go ahead now and move down here to face off against Aguilar in the blood round, which should be an exciting one. Nick Piccininni versus Michael Colloquio. Piccininni has wrestled a great season so far. He's somebody who's always impressed at the national championships, former All-American, and this season has wrestled soundly so far. Just won another Big 12 championship title for himself. Now, Colloquio is a young guy. He's a freshman, and so Piccininni's somebody, like I said, he's been sound. He's wrestled this tournament before. I think his style right now is a little bit more advanced than Colloquio's of Penn, and that's why, you know, you look at it, number 3 versus number 11 seed. That's even a rough matchup there. So Piccininni is going to move on into the semifinals. Now, looking at, and then we're going to have Colloquio move down here to face off against Brandon Courtney. So now let's move on to the last quarterfinals match. And I please, at this point, make sure that you're leaving your comments down below as to if you agree or disagree with me. I love to invite the discussion there. Camacho versus Patrick Glory. Camacho, like I said, has had a great season so far. Young guy. Patrick Glory, also a young guy. I think the difference here is even though Camacho is capable of pulling off those upsets, Glory, undefeated at this point, is just a little bit more powerful than him, and that's why I have to give Glory the victory there, facing off against Nick Piccininni in the semifinals. Now let's move down here, and Camacho is going to fill our last spot here in the blood round. Now, Aguilar versus Schroeder, what would happen there if these two faced off? Now, first off, and I'll kind of fly through the blood round a little bit, this is one of the most exciting rounds of wrestling, though. Typically in the NCAAs, this would be the semifinals and the blood round at the same time. It's one of the best. It is the best round in the NCAA championships, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. Those are the tickets that go for crazy amounts because those are the rounds everyone wants to see. Anyways, going back to here, going through this, I believe Schroeder is going to pick off Aguilar, just a little bit better of a wrestler there. D'Agostino versus Hildebrandt there. This may be another one that you disagree with, but I have to give D'Agostino the I don't want to call it an upset necessarily, but the win there, just because he has beat him in the past. He beat him by a score of 5-1, even though that wasn't sudden victory. And because of that, because he's beat him there, I have to give this to D'Agostino. On to these other two matches, Camacho versus Mackel. Mackel and Camacho actually faced off before, where Camacho won, and that's why, like I said, he's had a solid season. He's peaking at the right time. That's why Camacho moves on. And Courtney and Colloquio, at this point, Colloquio has had a solid season. Both these guys are young guys. Courtney is a little bit more experienced. He's a sophomore compared to Colloquio's freshman, but I'm going to give Courtney the advantage there, moving on into the Conci quarters. Let's advance now again into the Conci quarters before we get into the semifinals, just so we can fill out this, see who's wrestling then for 7th and 8th and all that. Moving on here, Schroeder versus D'Agostino. I got to give this to Schroeder just because he's impressed me this season. He wrestled off against Spencer Lee at the Big Ten Championships. Although he didn't beat him, he did wrestle him very solidly, and I just think he's a little bit better of a wrestler than D'Agostino, and that's why we're throwing him there. And that means D'Agostino now is going for 7th and 8th. So D'Agostino of Northwestern going for 7th and 8th, and Camacho and Courtney. I think this would be a heck of a match, and I would love to see that these two wrestle off. Camacho and Courtney. Camacho, I'm going to give it to him because he has had a better kind of end of the season so far than Courtney, a better postseason, and that's why I'm giving this to Camacho. And we're going to see D'Agostino and Courtney face off for 7th and 8th. Now, the semifinals, the NCAA semifinals. Who is going to win this? Spencer Lee versus Jack Mueller. Now, this is a rematch of last year's NCAA finals when Spencer Lee actually defeated Mueller by a score of 5-0. He beat him in the NCAA finals. A lot of people, maybe were expecting a major attack or whatever, just because that's the type of guy that Spencer Lee is. He's that type of wrestler. And I think that no differently this year, Spencer Lee has stepped it up. He's become a better wrestler. And yes, I do think that's possible. And I do think that happened. And that's why I think Spencer Lee, you saw Jack Mueller lose to Camacho in the ACCs. That does happen. Just because you lose in your conference championship doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't necessarily mean anything massive for NCAAs. However, I have to say Spencer Lee is just a guy on a different level than pretty much everybody in the entire tournament. Spencer Lee moving on to the finals. You're going to see Jack Mueller now go down here, face off against Camacho again. What's going to happen? Piccininni versus Glory. Wow. These two have wrestled 4 times in their college careers so far, and the only time that Patrick Glory has won is the most recent meeting, which does mean something. He won the most recent meeting. Like I said, Glory's a younger guy. Piccininni now is a senior. Patrick Glory, in the past, actually last year's national tournament, he lost to Piccininni twice. He lost by fall, and then he lost by a score of 9-5. So he lost twice to him. And then their first meeting, he actually lost 9-4. So all actually close scores: 9-4, 9-4, 9-5. And excluding the one pin. So what would happen this time? I think that Piccininni just really wants it this year. You know, he's a senior coming into this tournament. He just won another Big 12 title. He's beaten Glory in the past, and that's why I think I'm moving Nick Piccininni of Okie State into the finals against Spencer Lee. And maybe this is controversial, so please comment down below who you think would make the finals. Going down now to the Conci semis, we have Schroeder versus Glory. Glory is just going to be, he's going to be mad that he lost in the semis. You know, you see a lot of guys, they lose, then they have to go straight back to wrestling for see if they're going to make 3rd and 4th, if they're going to make 5th and 6th, what's going to happen there. Well, I believe, in my humble opinion, that Glory is going to be very upset. He's moving on. He's beating Schroeder. He was undefeated up until this point, and he actually has majored Schroeder in the past, although that was a couple years ago. I think Glory has nothing but improved, and that's why Glory, I'm moving him on into this match, and Schroeder's going for 5th and 6th now. So Schroeder for 5th and 6th, and then Camacho versus Mueller. To be honest with you, wow. Now, Mueller has beat Camacho in the past. He has win and a loss to him this season, actually. Their most recent meeting, though, he did lose 11-4 at ACCs. I think Camacho now, you know, moving through these through the Concis, he's just picking up a little bit more steam, and I think he actually beats Jack Mueller again, and that's why I have to give Camacho the 3rd and 4th spot. That's what he's going for. And Mueller moves down here now into 5th and 6th. So let's get these Concis out of the way, these Conci finals out of the way, before we move on to the big one, to the national championship. What's going to happen there? First of all, going for 7th and 8th place, D'Agostino versus Courtney. Their last meeting, D'Agostino won 6-3, and going by that, because we can't go by anything necessarily that we don't know, anything crazy like that, but D'Agostino, I believe, is going to pick up that victory again against Courtney, and this is a young matchup. For 5th and 6th, Mueller and Schroeder. Mueller's going to be mad. You know, he made the national finals last year. Now going for 5th and 6th. What is he going to be thinking? How is he going to do? He does also have you win against Schroeder, a 6-2 victory at the Cliff Key in Las Vegas this year. I think Mueller does it again. He beats him again. Mueller takes 5th place. Going for 3rd and 4th, Glory and Camacho. This is actually another solid match, a rematch of this tournament where they wrestled early in the quarterfinals, Camacho versus Glory, when Glory won. I think the same thing happens here. Same thing kind of goes for what I've been saying. Although Camacho is kind of on a tear, Glory just has a little bit more experience, and Glory is going to get 3rd. As far as the national championship, you know, you saw Spencer Lee and Nick Piccininni wrestle in the past many times, and it's always been an exciting match for sure. Now, Spencer Lee, the last meeting, he did major Piccininni in the dual meet, and he just looked very solid. Now, we've seen Nick Piccininni pin Spencer Lee before. It has happened. So, would that upset happen? Possibly. Possibly. But I don't think that Spencer Lee is going to let that happen in the finals. Maybe it's not a major like it was during the dual meet because, you know, he may wrestle a little bit tighter in the NCAA finals just to get the win and get his 3rd title. And that's why I have to say Spencer Lee is going to win his next NCAA title. I want to invite you to go ahead and click into the next video. I'm going to be releasing 1 video per day on this tournament. It's going to be very exciting. Going into 133 next. Those are your 125-pound All-Americans. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please, as always, leave a like on this video, subscribe if you're not already, and click to check out these next videos in the series.